what happens. I have just opened a live new session, and we're going to go from there and see what happens and see if we can make this work. We'll see if we can get Mary on here. For some reason, it wants to give me a hard time today. We've closed all the other browsers. I may just have to start all over and be done with it. Who knows? So we'll give it a few minutes and see if Mary comes on, and then we'll go from there. I'm texting her and everything else to see if we can get her on here. We want her to create a studio so she can get on. So let's see what happens. If not, we're just going to delete everything and call it a day. Oh, mercy. As with all things technology, it happens. Everything is closed except for this browser. So let's see what happens. See if she can get on. Maybe she can. I hope. So we'll just sit here and see if she gets on. Anyway, back to what we were discussing. Books. Ha ha! There she
That
is.
that one took a minute.
But it's okay, we're here now. Only with us. Okay, we are going to start over, ladies and gentlemen. This is Midnight Publishing with co-host Arthur Mary Brotherton, and we're going to talk all things books and publishing. But today we're going to talk about what happens when Amazon says, oops, your book's not up to par. So, take it and run with it.
I asked you that question.
So the way this conversation came up was Mary said, I've got a book that I keep
It's kicking my butt.
Yeah. Well, okay. What I do, because hardcovers, paperbacks, Kindle, and Audible all use different formats for their covers. And what fits a paperback will not fit a hardcover. The reason being is the hardcover has a wrap. And that wrap cannot have any of the verbiage because then it messes up the cover. So what I do with my covers is whatever base I started with my cover, I start all over again. I put that book up as a hardcover all at the beginning. Then I go to Cover Calculator, which is in the cover part of the Amazon. And then I tell it, I want it to be a hardcover. I want it to be 6x9. I want it to be white pages. I want it to read left and right. And I have X amount number of pages. It then gives me the dimensions for the spine, the total, and the front. I go back and I start with my front, and I change the front to, for a hardcover, a 6x9 is not a 6x9.
Nope.
It is a 6.197 by 9.236. So I go into my Photoshop and I change the image size to that size. Then I go to another program that I have, which is a photo program, and I type in my text with that new image size. Then I go back and create my spine, which is also different depending on the page size. The page amounts, and I save it. I go back to that same program that I put my text in, and I put my text in that spine. Then I go and do the same with the back part of the cover. Then I go, after I've downloaded the template for that hardcover. I pull it up. I do edit. I take all the stuff out that's got to be removed. Then I build that cover on that Adobe PDF file. I then save it as a PDF file, go back and upload it to the hardcover part of upload your cover. Then I go and say, yes, I've made changes. I go and preview it. If I see that it's still not working, I take it all back down and go back to square one and start again.
Yep, I've done that several times with one particular book. It's really interesting because the very first time I put my Sally's Heart on Amazon, it just went like melted butter in July. It was so easy. And then I helped another author put hers on, and it was okay, no problem. Couple of little glitches I fixed quickly enough. This last one, holy moly! Every time I upload it, it comes back. Nope, we don't like you.
Well, what I have found with some of my going to hardcover is I've changed the cover completely.
Well, this isn't even changing anything. I mean, I'm just trying to get her paperback on for her.
And it doesn't like the cover?
No, the cover's fine. It doesn't like
Is the formatting on the inside?
It keeps telling me that I'm bleeding wrong. And so I fix all the images. I know what I can do now, though. I'm going to go back and I'm going to give it, because I had made some of the images bleed because I wanted them that way.
They don't like that.
They don't care what I want.
Because it won't print well when they publish it. What I have found and what I have learned is when they publish the covers, they don't want it to bleed because number one, sometimes it messes up. You can't see the verbiage.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and make sure that everything is within the within the borders without any bleed, and they'll be fine. And I wanted to tell everybody, just in case you don't know what we're talking about, because books. Trust me, authors bleed. We blood, sweat, and tears in our books. But if you look at a picture of a book like this, the image goes all the way to the edge. There's no white, the only white spaces are the pages behind it. And Amazon will take it. I mean, it took this one just fine, and it took whole images. Like this one, look at that. That's a lot of bleed on that page. And it didn't mind it at all. But this other one's a little more complicated. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to fix it. I'll fix it and make it work.
And see, ladies and gentlemen, what newbies, what we call newbies, don't understand in this business is books just don't magically appear.
No, they do not.
I am still working on a book that I cannot get the interior formatted right. And I know it wants to drive me crazy. When a publisher says, I need your completed manuscript, no page numbers, in a 6x9 format with New Times Roman and 12 font, there's a reason for it.
Yes, yes.
We cannot spend 6 weeks, 12 lunches, and the rest of our lives when you have 15 different formats, 25 different margins on an 8.5 by 11 page, and we have to go in and reformat the whole damn thing over again. They need to be completed chapters. They need to be 6x9. And if you don't know how to do it, that's okay. Send it to us in 8.5 by 11. We can change that. That's easy.
But just make sure it's all the same.
Right. If I've got a New Times Roman 12-point font on chapter 3, and then I got some other unknown font that you have that I don't have on chapter 12, but it's 14. It is a nightmare to
And
get
for God's sake, don't go in there making all kinds of crazy indents and bullets, because that we have to take that stuff out and reformat it. The best thing for you to do is just write the story.
Follow and don't put page numbers. Please don't put page numbers.
No.
Because they will change once we get them. And going in with don't put page numbers, don't put your name, don't put the name of the book, don't do headers or footers, and don't put your page, please. Because we have to go in and clean all that up and reformat the entire book before we can even get it ready for editing, much less publishing. And also,
if people don't, I mean, if only we could, if all we had to do was write, I'd be in hog heaven.
Me too.
You know, here, I'm going to write here. You take it and make it right. And that used to be the way it was years ago.
Right.
That I guess that's why there's only 5 or 6 big publishers left. It's hard work.
And it's time consuming.
It's very time consuming. And people don't realize that you can't just click your fingers and make it happen. And for God's sake, if you put your manuscript in a publisher's hand, whether it's Yvonne's or Noble House or Random House, be patient.
Please.
Don't keep calling or texting or messaging on Facebook. Where's my book? Where's my book? Funny case in point. I had a family reunion this past weekend, and it was delightful. It was just the 7 of the 8 siblings, and we hired a professional photographer. And some of us knew what that entails. But the very next day, one of my brothers sent a message. When do we get our pictures?
Oh, my Lord. He did not.
You get them when you get them. I mean, she got them. I thought she did really a fast job. She turned them around by Monday night.
She must have stayed up all night looking at them
and she had 2 weddings the same day of our reunion. She's hungry.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
That's a bit much. I've done that.
This is her livelihood. That's hard. That's hard. Nobody knows. I'm not going to say nobody knows, but people who aren't in the industry,
they don't know.
Whether it's publishing or writing or photography or painting, any creative endeavor takes time. It takes more than a minute because, you've got the inspiration or the idea for the thought. And then you've got to be able to take that thought and put it into words. And sometimes you have to do research.
Yep.
Or interviews, depending on the book. And it doesn't matter if you're painting. You have to have an idea of how to get that vision from up here down onto paper or canvas. And it's the same with any kind of creative endeavor. You can't just
pop it out,
make it happen. And then exactly. And then when you finish the book, you have to go through beta readers. And I want to tell everybody who's writing, the best favor you can do for yourself is read your finished work out loud to yourself. Fix all your mistakes that you can find. Then read it out loud to somebody who's very critical. Mm-hmm. Probably your spouse.
That's the best person. I used to say, what? What?
Mine was so good about saying, nope, no, that will not work. You can't do that. I'm like, well, why not? And he'd say, you don't know? One time I wrote a nightclub scene. I'd never been in a well, I've gone dancing, but I've never been in an actual nightclub. And he said, no, that would never, ever happen that way. Let me tell you how it works. Thank God he knew.
And this is why I stopped reading quote unquote police crime novels and stopped watching um, crime shows on TV, because Jack and I, both being in the business, we go, what the hell?
You knew what it's really like.
Yes. Number one, you would never interview somebody with if they've said, I want my lawyer first thing. You don't sit down and interview them. That
No,
interview's done.
there is no way.
You
The
don't
minute
say,
they say, I want a lawyer, the conversation
you
ends.
walk out the door. You don't keep saying, well, if you talk to us, no. And you don't arrest somebody on a whim.
No, no.
I just shake my head. I told Jack I can't watch this, because if you're gonna write, make it believable.
Yeah.
At
And
least
see, I
make it
think
believable.
that may be one reason why I might not ever become a best-selling author. I'm reading a lot of bestsellers now for research,
Right?
but some of them, I just don't get how they got there.
BS, for lack of a better word. Well, I will put it this way: the mass market, they don't read for information.
They read for entertainment.
And if the entertainment bypasses all of the things that you and I are used to, it doesn't matter. They just read because they want to get lost in a book. Just like you and I both know, there is no happily ever after. It's fairy tale. Life
Yeah.
is life. Relationships are relationships that take work. But reading a romance novel, you have introduction, you have, oh, I'm madly in love with you after a 12-hour rendezvous. Then you have conflict, and then you have the conclusion, which is the happily ever after. I call it mindless TV and mindless book reading. I don't have to think, because I know what the conclusion is.
Well, it's like junk food for the
It's,
brain.
yeah, it is.
And sometimes that's good. That, we want an escape. We want to, but if I can write an escapism type book that teaches too, why not?
Why not? Why not? When I wrote Silent Scream, one of the reviews was, it is too, basically, bottom line, it's too technical. Excuse me, if you want a puff piece, go read somebody else. Because when I write true crime, I'm not telling you how wonderful the perpetrator was, and how it's not really his fault, and how my victim loved her pet dog so much, and what her favorite color was, and how she went to high school, and all these people. That's not the story.
You're writing true crime.
Exactly. This is what happened, this is how it happened, this is when it happened, and this was the result. And if you can't stand the crime scene photos, then I suggest you don't read my books. Of course, that book's been on TV 8 times, so you tell me.
Yeah.
The law enforcement loved it.
Because you wrote it accurately.
Exactly. That's how I write all my true crimes. The story is there, but you have to understand the story in order to understand what I've written.
Yeah.
That's why I pull all of the transcripts. I pull everything at the research. It takes time, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we ask you all to send us completed manuscripts. Don't send me chapters via Google Doc or Dropbox. I don't want chapter by chapter, because if I have to pull chapter by chapter, something's going to get lost. Mary can tell you, things get lost. They get in the wrong order simply because that's technology. Send me an email with your completed transcript, your completed manuscript. If you want pictures in that manuscript, then insert them where you want them. I can work with that. But if you want me to insert them and then you're going to complain, not that anybody has, but then you're going to complain where I've inserted them, they're not going in.
Right.
We have to have boundaries.
Everybody doesn't have the same vision for where an image needs to go.
Exactly.
And that's why you've got designers and you've got writers and publishers. Everybody has a role to play. And I've played all of those roles.
Yep.
I'm tired of it. I'm ready to
She knows, just like I know. But it makes our life so much better. And it's easier to transition your manuscript and your dream into the printed word. And we have very limited instructions, right? We don't give them a whole complicated bunch of instructions.
No, because it's hard enough to just write.
It is.
And
Everybody is not. Did we finish? Did we end?
No, we're still here.
okay, it's doing a countdown again.
Who knows?
I guess it counts to 99 and then turns around, or I don't know. But anyway, you and I are both kind of jack of all trades, if you
Yep.
will.
We are.
We can kind of do it all. But for some people, just getting their thoughts down on paper is a monumental task. So to give them a string of instructions other than don't number the pages. Now, do you like yours double spaced or single?
Everything needs to be single space because
That's what I would think.
when you double space a manuscript, it creates extra pages that you really, and it increases the price of the printing of the book and the
Well,
reading of the book.
that also goes back to the day when everything was printed
Yep.
and editors had to have space to leave their editing marks,
Yep.
and they would send you the manuscript back. Nowadays with digital, it's so much easier, but it's still difficult. You follow the publisher's instructions. Do it without all this fanfare and all this crazy. This was one of the hardest things that I had with Be Unique. I'd send the writers a guideline, and I would tell them, yeah, you know where this is going. Don't bold your words. Don't italicize them. Don't underline them. And for God's sake, don't make them 3 times bigger just because you think that word should be emphasized. We're not going to do that. We remove all that formatting and then we put it in the magazine the way we want it. But that was the hardest thing to get people to do and I will tell you, other publishers, if you don't follow their guidelines, they reject you outright. You're done. And you'll never get another chance with them.
And there's a reason for that, ladies and gentlemen, and the reason for that is just like we started off when we started this conversation. Putting a finished product together is time consuming. Before you can even think about, please don't send us a cover. Please don't. Because I can guarantee you it will not fit. Even you can send us ideas and we will send you a prototype, but please do not send us a cover because it will not fit. We have very strict guidelines that we have to go by with Amazon. And just like Mary was saying, this book that she's been having fits with is because those guidelines were not met. There's 2 books of Andrea's that I had to completely redo the cover because the paperback cover would not fit the hardback cover. It's 2 separate pieces of material.
If you think about it, the paperback cover is just a little bit thicker than the actual pages.
Correct.
But then you get a hardback cover. It's basically a picture over cardboard.
Correct.
And that intensifies or increases the thickness of the cover.
And the color.
And also with a hardback, you see here the pages are, I'm trying to get it at a good angle. The pages are inside. They're
Correct.
not flush like the edges of a softback.
And therein
So
lies the difference.
all of that comes into play when you're figuring out all these things. And
The cover that comes to mind with Andrea's book was Sundown or Vampire's Reprieve. With the soft cover, I was able to use a bold reds and blacks, and it showed up once it was printed. When I tried to use that same front cover for the hardback, they said, not going to work because we can't see the print. So I had to go and recreate an entire new cover which is okay.
now with Amazon, they don't give you jackets for the books. They print on the hard copy.
Just like that book you showed, that
Yeah,
hardback. Yeah,
you're right.
that
Because this is not a
that's
cover. That's the image on the
right.
cover.
That's how they print their hardbacks. It is the cover. That's why they have what they call the wrap. It is not you know how a lot of hardbacks have the dust cover,
Yeah,
and then you open it up and then the front of the book is just plain, there's nothing
right.
there. With Amazon, the entire cover is part of the book. That's why their criteria is so different, because it is literally wrapped onto that book, and it's not a dust cover, which
Right.
I'm okay with. And the reason I found that out is a friend of mine bought Silent Scream, and he said, I have the hardback. That boy buys everything I have. And it is literally wrapped onto the book.
Uh-huh.
That's why the title has to be smaller. The author's name has to be small, because that can only fit in a small window. And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, we ask that
That's unless you're this guy. His name is the biggest thing on the book.
right.
And look how thick this book is.
Exactly.
I mean, my God, I don't know if I'm going. Well, it's a little larger print, but not terribly large. It's 900 pages. I figured I got it at a used bookstore, and I figured I'd read it just to see if I
He's
know
a
what the
good
hype is all
author.
about.
He was one of Jack's favorite authors. I couldn't get into him because he's another one of those that describes a blade of grass 15 gazillion times. How many times can you describe a blade of grass?
I edited a fantasy novel for a young author. She's still working on my edits because I edit very thoroughly. Some people call it line by line. I'm like, no, it's word by word and letter by letter. But every now and then she'll send me a text and say, I need help. I don't quite understand your instructions or your recommendation. But one of the comments that I made was, okay, I can't remember his name, the love interest in the story. We already know that he has rippling muscles and long, luscious, beautiful hair that he keeps in a ponytail. We already know that his shoulders are bigger than an elephant's. You don't need to tell me this every single time you bring up his name. Talk about it once,
And move on.
and the next time you talk about him, find something else to address his physique. If you've done your job, and you have, we already know he's a hunk. Move on. We don't need to see his bare chest every time he comes into the room. She's mixing romance and fantasy genres is what she's doing, which is fine.
But you got to leave something to the imagination of the reader.
Yeah.
If you don't, then you cannot keep the reader engaged in that book.
Exactly.
Number one, they get bored. This is the reason I won't read Stephen King. The only book of his that I read that I loved was Pet Sematary, and that's because he did not describe every scene ad nauseum. He left a lot of it to my imagination. The rest of it, I mean, when it's this thick, and it's repetition, no thank you. It that doesn't help the story. Case in point, many years ago, my first horror movie that I went to the movie to watch was The House of Usher with Vincent Price. Edgar Allan Poe's work, beautifully written. He left it to the imagination. That movie was so suspenseful, and I would almost say almost frightening, because there was so much left to the imagination.
Dun,
They
dun, dun, dun.
they drew you in with the music, with the actors' visual facial expressions,
Yes.
and the only thing that you saw that was visual was when her hand came out of the casket and they were bleeding.
Yeah.
And then you saw her when she came into the room and attacked her brother. Those were the only two visuals of that horror that brought it to a conclusion. Everything else, the moviegoer got to sit on the edge of their seats and imagine.
Well, my first horror was Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Oh my
and they
God.
left nothing to your imagination.
I rest my case. And
I
that's sad.
don't I don't remember who did that. It had to be Kubrick or Tarant. I don't think Tarantino was doing it at that time, but it was somebody that just they don't want you to have to imagine anything. They want you to see it all, and it's very visceral and it was very disturbing. I've never gone to another horror movie since.
And this is what we've gotten away from in the artistic world. And I say this every day. The writers in Hollywood, they need to go back to writing 101. They have no imagination, for one thing. And for another thing, they don't, that and the directors. I mean, you got to put a lot of blame on the directors too, because they, their thought process is the gorier, the more we draw people in. Go back and read the classics. Go back and watch House of Usher. Go back and watch the old black and white Dracula movies. You knew what was going to happen. You just didn't know when.
Yeah.
And you didn't see it. You had to imagine it. Imagine that. Using your imagination to put the movie that's playing in your head and scare yourself. What a concept. When I wrote A Mad Hatter, it's historical fiction, but it's a combination of historical fiction, horror, thriller. But there's so much left of the imagination. You
Yeah.
really don't know who did it till you get to the end. But
I'm
then
writing up here. And I've been working on, I have ideas for books, and they will not come out and play until it's time.
No, they don't.
But I've got this one idea that I've been revisiting from time to time. It's about Jack the Ripper. And unfortunately, there are other people now also pushing it, which might be a fortunate thing, because it might fit into that genre. But I've got to flesh it out a little more.
Well,
And then when I do, it'll be interesting.
anything you want to know about the Ripper, I could probably tell you.
Really?
Yeah, because that is, when I was in college, get my degree when I was 55, we had to do a term paper on serial killers. And of course, I was the oldest one in the class, and all the other young guns were doing the John Wayne Gacy and all the new guys. I went back to 1888. The Ripper's always fascinated me. I did so much research on the Ripper that when I did my term paper, my professor said, "How did I know you were going to do this? And you're probably right as to who did it." That's how I wound up doing the Mad Hatter.
Wow.
I even ordered a map of East End of London in that time period. 4 years
Wow.
I worked on this book. So yeah, if you, and the Ripper you can take in so many different directions. Because number one, they don't know who did it. They will never know who did it. The investigations were botched so horribly that it wasn't even funny. The crime scenes were contaminated with
Well,
people.
there was no such thing as forensics back then.
No. And people took souvenirs.
It's so stupid.
And
But they would do that today if they could.
oh, absolutely. And they put the bodies on display for the public as grossly destroyed as those women were. And they didn't, law enforcement didn't believe the community where those things were happening because the women were prostitutes.
They discounted them as
Yeah, they were expendable.
just like you would a dog or a cat.
Yeah. I mean,
Who
we treat
cares?
our animals better than we treat some people, but they,
Yeah.
in reading all of this
And they were
history,
women.
yeah, and they were women.
And during that time period, women were maybe third-class citizens.
If even that. And the sadly those women were put in a position of not of their choosing.
Because, women who didn't get married and didn't have family or means to support them were automatically either thrown into the factories or on the streets.
Are in the workhouses or debtors' prisons, and most of them became alcoholics to survive.
And if you were a widowed woman, they didn't look very kindly on that. You were just somebody they had to take care of.
Right.
So what? You used to have a husband.
And they,
Women
and,
were
most,
at the
and sadly, a couple of those women, their husbands were abusers. They were drunks.
yeah.
So that Victorian period, as elegant as the historians try to make it, there is an underbelly that will totally make one sick. There is a book that was written by the same guy that wrote whatever it was he wrote. Please, sir, may I have some more? That talks about the workhouses.
Charles
Yeah.
Dickens.
Charles Dickens.
And
He-
that was Oliver Twist.
And that book is very true to how life was for the people in the East End and the poor people
Yeah.
of that era. They were thrown into debtors' prisons. Their children were thrown into debtors' prisons.
Yeah. And how can you pay a debt if you can't raise money? How can you raise money if you're in prison?
You can't unless somebody else pays it.
Yeah.
Children were working in workhouses for not even pennies a day. A lot of them died from hunger, from rickets, from being on the street. That's why you had the little kids that were thieves that adults took advantage of.
Pickpockets.
Pickpockets.
They taught them how to do that.
They did.
These children they were the most vulnerable because they were hungry.
Exactly. Or both parents were dead. They had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So while history tries to portray that era as one of advancement in industry and fashion and all the other things that they try to glorify, if you ever read about the East End of London in 1888, you can take the Ripper in all kinds of different directions.
Yep.
So, see, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're talking about. We get on, we have a schedule like how to get books that are rejected by Amazon, and then we take off on another tangent
We,
because that's
we have a topic because it makes us feel good.
what makes her feel good. I go unscripted. I don't care.
That's always been our best conversation because you have to just go with the flow. And sometimes thoughts come up and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, do you have your term paper on digital?
I do. I think.
Can I get a copy? Because, see, it's things like that that will help spark this book of mine. I have so many ideas written down. I've got so many books I've started, but then I get to a point where I can't go on because I have to research or something happens and I get pulled away. But they're waiting for me.
And when the time is right, they'll show up.
And they always do. They always do. And half the time, I mean, I've got all these books that I want to write, but so many of my current books were written because I was inspired to write that book at that time. And then everything else got thrown on the back burner.
And now maybe it's time to pick up one of those books.
Yep.
You know, it took me. Jack and I we're coming back from Atlanta, and he said, let's stop at Andersonville. Now, for those of y'all who don't know about Andersonville, Andersonville was at the end of the rail line during the War of Northern Aggression. The Confederates had run out of places to put prisoners, so they were going to build this rail line, this prison camp at the end of this rail line so they could get supplies, they could take care of the prisoners, they could do all this wonderful stuff. And it was towards the end of the war. What they didn't understand is the way they set this prison up, it was self-defeating. Number one,
it was created to fail.
It was. The Yankees blew up when Sherman came through Atlanta. He blew up the rail line. Supplies couldn't get through. So Sherman had a hand in killing his own people.
His own people, yep.
When they built the prison, there was a spring that was a freshwater spring, but it was used for everything except and including drinking water. So you had no food, you had no clothes, you had very little water. 3,000 prisoners died, as well as Confederates died at this prison camp. So when we went to this prison camp for history's sake, that's when the juices started flowing. I've got to write this story. 4 years later.
Yep.
Is when that book was published. Because it took me that long to research the battles, Andersonville, where most of the battles were fought, the generals, the fact that there were 300 women who fought in the Civil War as men. 3 of them were at Andersonville. They fought on the side of the North. 2 of them, when they died, were identified by who they were. The other one still remains an unknown. Well, that unknown became the protagonist in my book.
Nice. In which book?
A Voice from the Grave.
Okay.
And like you, this is how a lot of my books come about. It's not, I go out looking for subject matter. It shows up at the door.
Oh, yeah. I dream. I'll have a dream of something. I remember, oh my God, I was married to my first husband, and I had the most erotic dream. And all I remember waking up saying the word Mustafa. And I'm like, what? And that was way before Lion King came around. And I've written a short story based on that dream. And my critique group told me, you've got to turn this into a whole book. This is too good. And I didn't make it erotic. I just made it interesting, you know.
Right.
I took all the eroticism out of it. And my book about Jack the Ripper, I woke up one day and I thought, what if the killer had amnesia? And then he woke up one day and remembered what he'd done.
Ooh,
And he was horrified by it.
that's
So,
an
you know,
interest.
these are the things that go on in my head sometimes. I've got a friend that I've been emailing for the last 34 years or so, and every day. But I mean, she'll send me like a little. Her subject line will be morning irritations, the things her husband has done to piss her off,
That's a
and
book within itself.
she wants me to turn that into a book, kind of like a little Irma Bombeck type book.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah,
That would be lots of fun.
it would.
You know, I have a, a saying when I'm with people and other people tick me off. I'll say, I got duct tape in my truck. I really do have duct tape in my truck. I also have a tarp in the bed of my truck, and my truck has a tonneau cover. All I need is a shovel. Well, I'm
Well, put a shovel in the truck.
I'm going north to North Carolina to do a photo shoot for the North Carolina JCI Senate, and I'm going duct tape, tarp, and a shovel. That's the title of a book. The first line is, "It all started in the middle aisle of a hardware store." That's the very first line in the book. That's as far as I've gotten.
I love that.
But I'm in the middle of murder
But the rest of the book will come to you in time.
in time. Well, I'm in the middle of Murder in the Village, and I'm thinking this might be the next in the series. Who knows? Maybe the drag queens will show up again. Those queens are about to get on my last nerve.
Aren't they annoying you?
They are annoying me because
Well,
they
you
want
need
to
to.
show up in every
You
single book.
well, there's nothing wrong with that.
But they're so much fun.
Exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know what we're talking about, you have to go read The Pink Canary.
The Pink Canary.
Yeah, that book. That book has its own story. Bless them. So, let's go back to Amazon Publishing.
Yes.
Swing back around. Here at Midnight Publishing, we don't just publish our authors in paperback and Kindle. Mary will tell you. If the book has 79 pages or more, and that's not my law, that is Amazon, we can do it in hardcover. So if you send me a book and it's 78 pages or 74 pages, I can't put it in hardback unless I put a couple of blank
Pages.
If it's 50 pages, forget it. It's not going in hardback, but it will go up paperback, Kindle, and Audible. And the way that we do Audible is, I love AI. Amazon has made it so easy for me to put your books up on Audible. I don't have to pay a third party to read your books. All I have to do is find one of their AI folks, whether it's British, whether it's Southern, whether it has a Northern twang to it, different age groups. I find the one that fits the book the best. Any Southern novel is going to have a Southern reader. It just is.
It has to.
Has to. Because you can't put a Northern voice in a Southern book. That won't work.
Can you imagine a Bostonian reading a Southern noir?
I can't. That would be comedy on the worst level. but it will go up on Audible. Now, again, you say, well, Yvonne, what's the cost? $0. I posted something up on the page this morning. This is what we do here. And I'm always looking for authors. I'm fixing to take one of Mary's books and put step-by-steps up on Audible and Kindle for her.
It's on Kindle. I have it on paperback and Kindle.
But it's on Kindle under you. You can put it up on Audible yourself if you go up where it says self-published with us and you go up like you go up. Okay. If you look under Audible, if Step by Step has chapters, you can put it up on Audible yourself.
I
If
can do that.
if you have trouble and don't want to deal with it, take it down from Kindle. I'll put it up on Kindle and then run it on Audible right behind it, because I'll just put it up immediately for it to go live, and then I can put it up on Audible behind it.
Okay. Well, let me try it, see if I can make it work.
Okay. And that this is how we work together. And I'm going to tell you right now, Audible has all of their Audible books on sale. So all of my authors that are up on Audible, you can go and look their books up. Andrea Dean Van Scoyak's books are up there. All the ones that are more than 79 pages. If they're up on Kindle, they're up on Audible. Jason Wolfgang Gerhardt, he's up on Audible. Peggy Engler, she's on Audible. Alta Desanoid, she's on Audible. I still have more to put up and more to put up on Kindle. 4 avenues, people. 4 avenues. Whereas another publisher might charge you for every time they have to put up a book.
Oh, they would.
Especially if they have to fix the cover and change the cover and rework the cover. It's time consuming. And Mary can tell you, it doesn't always go up like you want it to. That's why you have to go back and rework it and make it, sometimes even change the cover. But it is so worth it when you have an author that just can't believe their work has been published.
I know we've talked about this, and I already know the answer because I know you. But I want you to tell the audience, what do you get out of this?
What do I get out of this? I get out of this the joy of being able to pay it forward.
Yep.
I started my first book in the 1970s when my children were little, and I did it with pen and paper. My very first manuscript I still have in a notebook, and it was pen and paper. And I sent out chapters, got rejected. I said, okay, fine. From 1977, 78 to 2006, that book sat and didn't go anywhere. It just sat. I got busy. I moved to Florida in 2006, and I decided that nobody else would do it. And because I'm the person I am, I'm stubborn, I'm tenacious, and I knew there had to be a way, I decided to do it myself. This was a time when indie authors were called self-published, and it was like an ugly word. There
was a stigma attached to it.
Very big stigma. You're not good enough. If you're not published by one of the big 6, you're not, don't talk to us. You're not good. We don't want to buy your book. You can't write. Excuse me. I've been writing since before I started school. So I learned everything I could about the internet, marketing. I found all kinds of social media. I was on MySpace when MySpace first came out. I gathered around me like-minded people. There were about 7 of us. And we started publishing on Lulu, Barnes & Noble, their online, wherever we could get our books out. That's what we did. My books took off. I mean, Silent Scream's been on TV twice in Europe. And we were finally recognized as having worth, like we didn't already know it. And so many people, like Mary, encouraged us and helped us on this journey. Well, here I am 19 years later, and I'm seeing a whole new band of authors wanting to be heard. And it's like my victims in my true crime books. If I don't give them a voice, who will? We can always say somebody, someday, somehow, somewhere. Who is somebody? That somebody is us, Mary and I. We're the
That's what my husband said when we decided to move in with my mom to take care of her. I kept for years. I'd been saying somebody's going to have to step up soon and do something. And he looked at me and he said, "You're somebody.
There you go.
Why don't you do something?" And I said, "What can I do? I live in Florida. She's in South Carolina." He said, "Well, you can tell your husband to pack his bags, that you're bringing him here and you're going to live here." So we did.
So we're the somebodies.
Yeah.
We are the ones.
You nudged a thought, a memory. When I first moved to Florida, I joined every writers association I could join. And I think that's a good idea to a point, because every writers association isn't going to help every writer.
Exactly.
And I learned this the hard way. And it was very painful for me because I was still, I'd been divorced for several years, but I hadn't quite gotten over it. My sister keeps telling me I hadn't gotten over it yet because I talk about it. But I talk about it now as an example to other women, not because I'm hurting over it.
Right.
But when by 2000, we moved here in 2002. And within 2 months, I was already being paid to write. I found a little newspaper and I was making hella good money working as a journalist. And then I started editing, and then I started freelancing. I was basically a professional writer, plain and simple. And I'd go to these meetings and people would look at me. This was back when the indie was still kind of stigmatic, but they'd say, "Well, what have you written?" And I'd hand them a copy of the paper. I said, "But this one. It's basically my issue. It's my name everywhere." "No, we mean, what books have you published? You're not a published book author? Oh, you poor thing. Well, give it time. You'll figure it out." I thought a few Sunday school words, and then I thought, "Lady, you don't know who you're talking to. I'm making more money than you are. And I'm not having to do any of the marketing or any of that." And there's a part of me that would go back to that. Never.
Well,
I'm-
and what they didn't understand is they paid a vanity publisher to publish their books.
Yes.
They're sitting on all these books that never sell.
Yeah.
Not happening, Captain. That's not
So
what
there. And a lot of these vanity publishers, you have to pay them a fee, not just to print your books, just to look at them.
Yep.
And so many people get suckered in by these. I think they're kind of shady. They call themselves hybrid publishers.
Yeah, they're shady.
Yeah.
Very
They're
shady.
they're just not quite what they should be. And because I know what's out there, I know what can be done, and I know how to do it. Yeah.
We've done it many times over.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I personally been burnt by a shady publisher many, many years ago. I don't have to get bitten by the same snake twice to know
No.
snakes
No.
bite.
Yeah.
And that's what I want authors out there to understand is, number one, if you have to pay a publisher to publish your books, either up front, now I understand cover designers because that is a craft, but if you have to pay that publisher thousands of dollars to publish your book, plus you have to buy thousands of dollars worth of books in lieu of that, stay away from them.
Yeah.
And when some somebody calls you and says, "My name is Maria Gonzalez," for lack of this conversation, and when we saw your book and we're so excited, we
Oh,
want to publish your book. My antenna goes up like, yeah, and what is your price?
well, nowadays they're really getting clever. They'll befriend you on Facebook, and they'll give you a minute, and then all of a sudden you get, "Hi, Mary, how are you?" And I'm like, I don't know you.
Exactly.
Yeah. What are you selling? Oh no, I just noticed you've got a book. And would you send me the link to it? I tell them, just go look up my name on Amazon. You'll find me.
There you
I'm the
go.
only one out there. Because they always want my link. I don't care why. I don't know why they want my link. And then they come back, "Oh, I see you don't have very many reviews yet." Well, I'm sorry, my readers are slow, or my readers are forgetful and stupid. They don't know how to do a review. My older sister read Steep Steps over the course of about 4 or 5 months, and every 2 or 3 weeks she'd send me a little mini review. I'm still reading it. I don't like Jim. And then she'd go, "Oh, I like Cody." I'm like, "Okay." And then she'd send me another little text. "I am still reading your book, but I have other things to do." But
Okay.
then my neighbor bought the book. I didn't even know she'd bought the book, but she bought the book off Amazon. And then I met her on the corner one day. She goes, "My God, Mary, how could you do this?" I said,
What?
"What did I do?" She said, "Oh, I bought your book." I said, "Don't blame me for what my characters said." She said, "How could you be such a good writer and not tell anybody?"
Oh,
Mhm.
okay. Because we don't brag on ourselves. This is another thing, ladies and gentlemen. My late husband used to say, "I don't brag on myself because when I brag on myself, it really means I'm not who I am. I let others do that for me."
Yes.
99% of the people in this village have no idea who I am or what I've done. None of them knew I was an author. None of them knew I had a podcast for all those years with over 500,000, and none of them knew I'd been on TV 8 times until one of them texted me one night and said, "Oh my God, Yvonne, I'm watching ID Channel. You're on there. Did you know that?" Yeah, I think I
Yeah,
was
I
listening
knew
to
it.
that interview.
We went to a community block party recently. Well, last Christmas, I think it was. And we were sitting around drinking and eating and talking. And most of the people I know, but I know the people on my street. I don't know the people on 3 streets over. But one of the younger women, I got ready to leave, and she goes, "You cannot leave."
Excuse me?
I said, "I have 2 legs, and they know how to walk. Why can't I leave?" She said, "Because I just found out you're the author in our neighborhood. I want to talk to you."
Okay.
I said, "You want to buy a book?"
There you go.
The photographer at our family reunion bought one of each of my books.
Nice.
Yes. I was talking to one of my brothers, and he said, "So what are you doing now?" I said, "Well, right now I've got the 5 books, working on a few other things, and I'm looking for an agent, blah, 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 blah." And then the next thing I know, the public photographer comes up to me. She goes, "You're an author? What do you write?" So I started telling her, "I want to buy that book." I said, "I'll be right back." I wasn't going to give her a link to Amazon when I could sell her all of my books. I said, "I've got 2 on Amazon. The other 3 haven't made it there yet because I have to fix a few things I found."
And this is how we roll.
Yeah.
Another now I'm getting tongue tied. Another thing that I want to caution our authors about is if someone comes up to you and says, "I want to write, but I don't know how. Will you ghostwrite for me?" Please say no.
No, no. And stay away from this. Let's co-author.
Yeah.
Unless you're James Patterson and you're trying to find somebody to continue your legacy after you die.
Unless you're like my friend Andrea and we're both in each other's heads so much
That's another thing.
that we feed off of each other.
Yeah.
But
I've had 2 authors try to get on my coattail. Mary, you're such a good writer. And they give you all this praise and they glorify you. I'd like to co-author a book with you. Well, you find out that you end up doing all the heavy work. And sometimes they'll say things like, would you just review my book for me and tell me any changes? What they're looking for is a free editor.
right.
And they'll say, well, we'll be co-authors. You just help me fix it. I know there's some problems. And both times that I fell for that, this was way back in the day, but both times that I fell for that scheme of theirs, I had to end up walking away and hurt feelings.
People that do that, they probably have a gift for writing, but they're afraid to take that leap of faith because they're afraid of rejection. Well, this is something else Mary and I are both very familiar with. And if you don't have rejection, you're not going to appreciate the successes.
Exactly.
The successes are not owed to any of us. If I don't sell another book between now and the time I die, it doesn't matter. And that's what I said this morning in my little thing I posted. It doesn't matter. Edgar Allan Poe died penniless and grieving.
Well, most authors do. I mean, yes, there are exceptions to the rule. There are the J.K. Rowlings and the formula writers like Danielle Steele and the Stephen King, who writes the same thing over and over and over again. Jodi Picoult's a more modern writer, and I like her books, but yet I end up picking them apart. If I read too many too close together, I start finding she cliches herself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should do a show on cliches one day.
We could do that.
The one that gets me, and I've seen it in at least 3 different authors, I released the breath I didn't know I was holding.
What?
Yeah,
You don't know you're
I guess you. Wait for it. Wait for it. No, you know you're holding your breath. I know one author who, instead of commas, uses the word and.
over and over again.
All throughout, and start sentences with and. Oh, just so many things that just seem so. Maybe I have higher expectations. I remember once when I was working for the newspaper, we got a new editor in, chief editor, and that wasn't her. She was brought on because of her name, although I'd never heard of her before. She was not in the publishing industry, but the publisher brought her on because she thought she could help boost readership or something. I don't know. But the very first time we were editing the paper, the other woman said, "Don't you think we should have the writers dumb this down to like a 5th grade level?" I said, "Oh, no, I do not." She said, "Well, that's what Florida Today does."
But you don't work for Florida Today.
I said, "Well, we're not Florida Today." I said, "We have higher standards here." And that was one of the reasons that the publisher liked me, was because I gave her publication a little bit of class.
Right?
And she won award after award every year in her little niche publication because I made it more sophisticated. And I said, no, our job is not to dumb down ourselves for the average reader. Our job is to provide something that the average reader can aspire to. I mean, I love it if I have to have a dictionary while I'm reading.
Me too. Oh, me too. And while we put out books for people to read for pleasure, we want folks to do a couple of things: enjoy the book, learn something from the book, and use words that causes one to have to think. It's
Yeah.
called critical thinking. If we put a book out there that is simple as See Jane Run, See Dick and Jane, what is the purpose? I'm going to tell you, I was so bored in first grade because my mother taught me to read and write before I ever started school. I had to answer the business phone for my father at 5 years old,
Yeah.
the oldest. So I had to learn to read and write. So I'm in first grade, and all the little kids are sitting in the reading circle going, See Jane Run? And I'm at the back of the book going, okay, I'm done here.
Yeah.
It bored me. And I
My
think
mother told me that I was 4 years old with a crayon correcting the cereal boxes.
see, don't be afraid to use
Be
words.
yourself.
Right. If there's a word that comes to your mind that you want to use, you don't know how to spell it, look it up. Spell it. Use that word because it causes readers to have to do critical thinking. Oh, there's a word. I don't know what it. Let me go. What is that word? They won't forget it. And make your books where that reader doesn't just read the book, but they're drawn into the story, and when they get to the last page, they go, what? I'm finished? I want more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for heaven's sakes, please, when you write the next book, change the entire concept of the book. Change the plot line, change the characters, change the setting. If you want to write a book that's taking place in Hoboken, research Hoboken. Because I guarantee you there are people from Hoboken that will know those places and go, oh yeah, I grew up there. Oh yeah, I remember that place. So and so happened at it gives the reader more interest and more active involvement in your story.
Yep. I have never been to Oregon, but my novel is set in Oregon. So I just got online and I researched and I used Google Maps and I saw where this street goes into that street and what's on that street. I mean, today we have so many more advances than even 20 years ago. But when somebody from Oregon reads my book, I've had one guy at least reach out to me and say, I felt like I was going home. And he asked me, when did you live in Oregon? I've never been there.
I have. Portland. Don't like it.
Portland and Salem are my main cities, but the activity takes place in the forest, in a cabin in the forest.
If you want to do a crime novel, use Portland, Oregon. And I will
Good
tell
burying.
it's yeah. Had to go there for a meeting. My friends decided they wanted to go downtown. And I'm saying, no, I don't think you want to go downtown. Oh yeah, it'll be safe. Okay. Now, you know my background.
Yep.
So we get on the train, go to downtown Portland. The train lets us off under an overpass. And it smells like a sewer on steroids. And I'm watching all these people and I'm saying, I know y'all want to go to this particular restaurant, but the hair on the back of my neck is standing straight up. Not liking this. We go to this particular restaurant. We have lunch. We get back on the train to go back to the hotel, and this girl gets on the train. And we're sitting in this car that she gets on. I'm sitting over facing her on this side. My friend and his wife are on this side. My friend's wife decides she's going to take a nap, and I lost Mary.
I'm here.
I'm here. Okay, there you are. And my friend and I are sitting on the aisle seats across from each other. This girl gets on the train, and I looked at him, and he looked at me. Didn't say a word. We didn't have to. She's looking around. She's looking at us. We're looking at her. She's looking at the people behind us. And I'm thinking, girl, if you even think about doing what I know you're thinking about doing, this will not end well for you, because I will take you down and take you out. Well, she must have read my mind, because at the next stop, she got off.
Really?
I looked at Jay and I said, you know what she was going to do. He said, oh, yes, I do. She thought she was going to rob all of us, because our car was fairly empty. There was us three in the front and the guy in the back that I guess he was in another time zone because he wasn't paying attention. And she thought we were targets. Wrong answer. So she hopped her head, and she had a backpack on. I mean, she you could tell she was wound tighter than a spring. She was
Yeah.
ready to rob us. Not today, honey. Not happening today. So if you want to write about a crime in Portland, yeah, that would make a perfect novel for you. Not happening. Don't go to Portland. I didn't like it. I don't care if I never go back. We have talked for an hour and 16 minutes.
It took us long enough to get to that point, though, didn't it?
I got to go back and delete the other ones where we started and stopped and started and stopped.
Man, I mean, last week we did this. I just clicked the button, clicked the link, and I was there.
Well,
This time,
I think it
they
was.
wanted me to jump through fiery hoops.
I think it's because I added chat. So next week when we do it, I won't add the chat, and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
And then maybe we can add the chat once we get started, because
Maybe.
we want people to interact with us on these shows and even bring on guests. So we'll work out the kinks, ladies.
We'll figure it out.
It's nothing but a thing with us. We've been doing technology for a long, long time. And I want to swing back around to your writers groups, because I got some of the feedback you did. I joined one and I thought, what am I doing here?
I know more than they know.
These people, they're lost somewhere, and it's not the Twilight Zone. The idea at that point in time was they were self-published, quote unquote. They had all these books and they had paid to have, but yet they weren't selling any books. But they wanted to critique me for what I had done. No, no, that's not the way that dog hunts, honey. I've probably been doing this a lot longer than you have, because some of them still weren't published, but they weren't ready yet. Okay, either you're ready or you're not. And my friend Peggy that writes inspirational, she told me, she says, Yvonne, I've been writing for years, but I'm afraid to put myself out there. I said, well, guess what? Those days are done. Because when I wrote Soulful Inspirations and we were putting it together, I said, I want some of your devotionals in here. And she said, but I don't want my name on the book. I said, no, that's not how this works. You get credit for your work. That's how it works. Well, I unleashed a monster. But that's okay. But ladies and gentlemen, this woman was 80 years old when she first published, because she was afraid to put it out there. Yes, it's okay to be apprehensive. It's okay to say, what if nobody reads it? Who cares? You have to be willing to take that leap of faith. All of my books are not for everybody. I'm going to tell you. Mary will tell you. All of my books are not for everybody. But that's okay because there's a market for each of the genres that I write, and I
Yes.
everything but romance and erotica and science fiction. I won't write those three things. Number one, erotica to me leaves absolutely nothing to the imagination. You can go to a strip club and see that. You can buy porn and see that. I don't have to write about it. Romance, there's no happily ever after. It's too easy to write for me. I have to have something that stimulates my brain cells, or I get bored and the voices go to sleep and say, "Wake us up when you got something more interesting for us to say."
Yeah.
Fantasy. Now, if you want me to write about witches, vampires, and werewolves, I can do that all day long. It's based on horror. But fantasy with fairies and elves and the little land of Nod, puts me to sleep. But that's okay because there's others out there that do it very, very well.
There's somebody for every genre to write it and read it.
Exactly. If you want to read gritty true crime, I got 3 of them. If you want to write historical fiction, I got 2 of them. If you want to read about drag queens, got you covered. And it is true drag queen culture because I had a drag queen who was willing to help me when I reached out to her with that culture. So if you want to write about something that you are not familiar with, don't be afraid to research it. Don't be afraid to reach out to someone that knows about the history of that or knows that culture or knows that demographic. Am I right?
Absolutely. That's why I must have talked to, I'd say 50 to 60 either sex therapists or people who have sex addiction issues while I was writing my book. I'm not an expert in that. I don't, thank God, have that as a concern, but I wanted to make it as real as possible. So I researched, I talked,
And
and
we learn.
most people are more than willing to share their expertise with you.
And it makes the book more interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I can't help you if you want to write about the fairy world or if you want to write about romance because I don't believe in happily ever after. Or if you want to write about erotica because that is way over my pay grade. But if you want me to talk to you about Jack the Ripper like Mary, or if you want to talk to me about serial killers, which is my expertise, or if you want to talk to me about domestic violence, which I have lived, or if you want to talk to me about people with mental and physical challenges, which I have a brother who is mentally and physically challenged, which is the first book that I wrote, which took all those years to publish. If you want to talk to me about the drag queen culture, which I'm a little bit proficient in now, if you want to talk to me about teenage pregnancies and Department of Family and Children Services, I know those things. And I'm happy to share them with you. As Mary is happy to share with you what she knows. But there is nothing worse than trying to read a book that somebody has written that they have absolutely no knowledge of. Not
They're not a part of the culture. They don't do their research, and they just have an idea. I'm going to write a story about trains, and they've never ridden a train before in their life.
or know that there were steam engines and there were horse-drawn trains before there were steam engines. Did y'all know that?
I did.
Yeah. So know your write about whatever you want to, but at least know your subject matter before you ever do a rough draft. If you have an idea and you're not sure about the dynamics of the book or how it's going to go or what all is involved or the city or the state or the country, do your research. It took me, I graduated from college in 2006. I released a Mad Hatter in, it was either right before Jack died or right after Jack died. And he died in 2018. That was the last book that I released right before he died. So 2006, 2018, I did a lot of research.
Yep.
If you want to build a fantasy world, my suggestion is build the world on paper before you commit it to a novel. Because if you don't, you will have characters with like sounding names or worlds with like
Oh,
sounding.
yes. And as an editor, I ask all of my writers to send me a character sheet. And that's so I make sure. And there were some in this last fantasy novel where the names just sounded too much alike. And a reader gets confused.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, she had used a Star Trek term for one of her characters, and she'd never been following Star Trek, so she didn't know. So, if you're going to be writing in a genre, you kind of need to know what else is out there that's
Yep.
going to trickle over. And I had created a character sheet for myself when I was working on Steep Steps, because I didn't want to get halfway into it and forget. Now, was his first wife his age, or was she younger? Because he married a much, much younger woman the second time around. How do I make this? I need to make sure it doesn't seem stupid. And so when I started reading my book to my husband, who doesn't like to read, but he loves to watch movies, he needed a character sheet, because sometimes because it's a very involved family saga. There are
Right.
people. You can't just, I've heard some people say, well, you've got too many characters. Then you don't have a big enough mind. But I gave Curtis the character sheet, and he looked at it every now and then. And by looking at it, he could say, that person's name is too much like so-and-so's name. I think you might want to change it. I'm like, okay, let me think on that. But there were times I thought he was falling asleep, but I learned to listen for the snore. If he wasn't snoring, he wasn't sleeping. And if he had his eyes closed, he was watching the movie in his head.
And
And now he wants.
the person that said you had too many characters, I wonder if she's ever read R.R. Martin's books. I've read them all. When that series came on HBO, I happened to walk out on the lanai one night, and Jack is watching this series, and I'm going, what is
That
this?
looks familiar.
And he says, Game of Thrones. And I went, I'm reading the books. Well, it got to the point, especially with the Red Wedding,
Oh,
I don't understand what happened here. So I said, well, this is the backstory. So I had to explain to him why, because they had to leave that. And that was, I fault the writers for that, because the backstory was an integral part of that wedding.
yes,
That wedding made no sense
by itself.
by itself.
That was my younger son bought all the books, and he shared them with me. So he'd read the book real quick before the next episode came out. I'd be reading it, I'd be almost finished when the episode would come out. Curtis had no clue. So we would sit there. Matt would always be at our house when we'd be watching it, and we would just fill him in on all. By the way, the Red Wedding, stop the show, listen to this. This is what you need to know before you get to the Red Wedding.
That's what I had to do with Jack. And he said, if he hadn't have known that I'd read the books, he wouldn't have understood a lot of the things. The dire wolves, John Black. because there's always a backstory, but there's a lot of characters. So when you said that you got the complaint too many characters, this person should read R. Martin's books
Well, this is a person who would rather watch the movie.
and be totally lost in it.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting. R. Martin was supposed to have written one after the last one, and we're still waiting. And then the what's it called, Dragon's Lair or whatever it is that came out on HBO. I don't even want to watch it because I can guarantee you that it's not going to follow his storyline.
We watched it and it followed it, like a 30,000 foot flyover.
Yeah, I love that.
It was enough that you could see the resemblance, kind of like a third cousin once removed.
Oh, yeah. And that's sad because that is an author that I don't care how thick his books are. I don't care how many characters he has. He keeps me engaged. And
Yes.
it's pure fantasy. But you can tell he built a storyline. He built his characters. He built the kingdoms, the 7 kingdoms. And Jack asked me one time, he said, Yvonne, why are all these things popping up? I said, because, honey, there's 7 kingdoms in this book. And all of the rulers of these 7 kingdoms are trying to take over each other's kingdoms. This is way before the Middle Ages. This is way before Rome took over all the other countries it took over,
Yeah.
including Britain. And that's why all these kingdoms pop up. But you understand the storyline because he gives you a road map at the beginning of each book.
He does. And he builds on the previous book. He doesn't just plug in new characters in the same old situation.
Right. When the Tarragon daughter was forced to marry Khaleesi, and in the movie it doesn't give you the backstory. She's just there and her brother just throws her basically to the wolves. Well, the backstory was the brother was trying to protect his kingdom.
Yeah, that's all he cared about.
Yeah, he didn't care about her. And in the end he lost, so she won. This is why just give me a book. I've gotten to where I hate watching TV anymore. I hate it. If it doesn't grab me in the first 5 minutes, I go, okay, I'm done here. Even with series, I'm done here. It's got to really grab me, and the writing has just gotten horrible. So back to books, ladies and gentlemen. You need books.
Well, I know that Curtis would love to see Steep Steps become a series on TV.
That would be good.
It would be good, but it's gonna, there are a lot of hoops I got to jump through to get that.
That is true.
And that's why I'm looking for an agent. That's the only reason. Because if I get an agent, they can make the connections for me.
Maybe if they're
Maybe.
if they're the type of agent they should be.
Yeah. But I just don't have enough. I guess I don't have enough gumption to try to do it on my own. I don't know how to do it on my own. But I do know this, that if the time comes and the situation presents itself, I'll end up making this on my episodic myself and stream it on YouTube.
There you go. What I would suggest, because one of my books was done this way, Tangled Minds, a friend of mine wrote it into a screenplay. 25 pages maximum is what you write a screenplay. It's 25
That's a 30-minute
Yeah.
series episode.
So and even the hour episodes are only 30 minutes. 15 because you've got all the other ads, but 25 pages, and you leave the direction to the mind of the director, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
You can add
This is where trust comes in.
exactly. And when a studio buys a person's book, the author has to be willing to allow that book to be shredded.
Yes.
A book is never, a movie is never, ever, ever the same as the book. Even when they took Stephen King's book, Pet Cemetery, and made a movie out of it, not half as good as the book because they shredded it. The writers rewrite the book to gain the visual audience.
They want the visual audience. They want the investors audience. There are certain things they have to do from a financial standpoint. And just like with the Game of Thrones, he got lucky. And Star Wars and Star Trek was interesting because it was before its time. But so many of these things can't be done in the physical world.
Right.
And I know that my novel has a bit of a fantasy flair to it. I created a world where he lives the physical 12 steps.
Right.
He goes on a hike, and each step is either difficult or easier depending on which of the 12 steps it relates to. And there's a certain amount of art involved in it. There's a certain amount of nature involved. And so it's a curated hike, basically. And it was created by a person who employed an architect to make it cohesive and meaningful to the men who participated in it. It more than anything is a chance for him to be alone in the wilderness with his therapist. And it's a giant group session, and he doesn't even realize it until he makes his connection with his higher self. But it doesn't exist in the real world, but the way I've created it in my head, it could be redone or something similar on a TV set.
It could be an actual journey.
Yeah.
But again, ladies and gentlemen, this is in the world, in this world of publishing and book writing that we live in, like Mary and like myself, we understand we would like to see our books on the screen. Even J.K. Rowling's, I didn't read her books because I'm not into that, but they even took her books and completely destroyed them and rewrote them. She had Patterson's books. They do the same thing. The other one, the Jesse Stone books, they are completely ripped apart and rewritten. This is what they do.
And they don't do it maliciously.
No.
It's just but they pay you enough to make you accept it.
They do. They really,
I
really.
mean, it would be a dream if my book were to be taken and turned into an episodic. It might not happen in my lifetime. We'll see.
And if not, that's okay too. It could happen down the road somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, look at all of Shakespeare's plays that have been turned into movies, not just more plays.
Oh, I have a story to tell you. You will appreciate this. Now, for all of you Floridians that live in the state of Florida and have sat through Mother Nature when she goes bipolar in the summertime, better known as hurricane season, last year when the one came up the coast and we thought we were going to get hit in Vero, but it wound up taking out Daytona, and I'm sitting here and we're getting tornado warnings and watches. Now, I come from Georgia. We get those all the time. So I'm sitting here and I'm watching Hamlet, the best production of Hamlet I've ever seen. And I keep getting these warnings and I'm going, okay, that's nice. Where am I going to go? I live in a tin can. There's nowhere to go. You know, it's my time to go. I'm out of here. So, okay, it's going to be done in a minute. Okay, back to Hamlet we go. Another one. Okay, back to Hamlet. We got 2 minutes. 2 minutes before the end of that movie, my internet went out.
Oh no.
I was not happy. I mean, the ending wasn't going to change. It was just the best production of Hamlet I've ever.
And you already knew what the ending was going to
But
be.
it was the idea. I was not happy. But again, with Hamlet and with all the other of the Shakespearean plays, they redo it for television, the big screen, yada, yada, yada. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have higher aspirations, and I'm not saying don't have those, but if you have higher aspirations, understand that if you are fortunate enough to have your book, quote unquote, bought by a studio for production purposes, what you see on the screen is not what you're going to read in the book. Just not.
And if you think it took a minute to write your book, be patient. It could take 5 minutes to produce it into a film.
Because they have to get actors, they have to get location, they have to get gripes, they have to get assistants, they have to get designers, they have to get producers, they have to get a director that's willing to direct it, they have to get the food set up, they have to get the medical set up, they have all this stuff has to go into play before it ever starts being put on film.
Yep.
So it could take 5 years. It could take 10 years. And if actor number one doesn't want to participate, then they got to keep going down the line until they find some actor that wants to be involved. So you think writing, it's like she says, you think writing and getting published takes a minute? Takes quite more than a minute to get on film. But with that being said, we'll save that for another day. What are we going to talk about next Wednesday?
What do you want to talk about? I mean, it doesn't matter what we say we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about anything else. But why don't we do what we said earlier? Talk about a few cliches
Hey,
and what's wrong. And what's wrong with them.
Let's do that.
To me, I'll give you a teaser, folks. A cliche is a lazy way to write.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Now, I very seldom use cliches, and I will make up my own. Like, there's a line in the new book that I'm writing, Murder in the Village, that goes something like, apparently he didn't understand that bodies in water go floated and bloated.
As long as you say that once or twice in the book, that's fine.
The only time it was said, because it fit that conversation, but it's not something anybody else would say. So we will talk about cliches, and I had an idea. You know, you and I need to hook up for lunch between. So I'm thinking we should do a live show in the same space on the same computer when we hook up for lunch.
Let's do that.
Okay.
I'm available.
We can make that happen. So
we can certainly do that.
We're going to close this show because we've been almost 2 hours here, which is fine. We could go another 3. But we want to
a blip in the ocean.
We want to go and keep y'all hanging for next Wednesday. So thank you all for listening. All of this is going to go up on all the social medias. We're on Amazon Music. We are on iTunes. We are on
Spotify.
We're on Spotify. We're on iHeartRadio. We're on YouTube. We're on all of our social medias. So you're going to get this whether you want it or not because we're everywhere. That's what we want.
We're like Santa Claus. We're everywhere.
And the website is being now outside of the country. We're not just in the U.S. I looked it up the other day. We are building slowly, and that's what we want. We have listeners and readers and listeners in Canada, all over the United States. So it's getting there. We are building again. I'm so excited. So until next Wednesday, thank you again, my friend. It's
Thank you.
It's always
Thank
fun.
you for your patience. I don't know what was going on this morning, but it wasn't playing nice, but we figured it out.
Because we're tenacious.
We are tenacious. We got stick to itiveness.
And if you don't understand what that word means, look it up. Promise you,
Yes.
you will love it. You will absolutely love it. So until next Wednesday at 11 o'clock, right here, I want to say thank you, Mary. Thank you, listeners. Please share this. And please do not give up on your dream. No one has a right to steal it without your permission.
No, they don't.
So until next Wednesday at 11 o'clock, we say adieu, adieu.
Adieu, adieu, ciao, sayonara, bye-bye.
Bonsoir.
Au revoir. What's the other word? No,
Hasta
that's a sayonara.
luego. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
Live long
I'll
and
be
prosper.
back.
Live long and prosper.
Yes, I can't do the finger thing though.
Well, I can't either, but that's okay. So until then, we will see y'all later. Goodbye,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.